After 1996's record 9 books released in 1 year, 1997 proved a more leisurely year, with only 6 books released. The 4th X-Wing book, hardcover releases in the spring and in the fall, the first 2 volumes of A.C. Crispin's Han Solo trilogy, and a 4th Tales collection. And with the completion of Stackpole's 4-book series in February, we wouldn't see another X-Wing book until next year, with Aaron Alston's Race Squadron coming out in February 1998. The Bacta War made it to number 13 on the New York Times paperback bestseller list for the week of February 2nd, 1997. So my recollection of the Bacta War, I hadn't thought that I reread these 4 books very often, but apparently I did, because a lot of the things that I thought were missing or left out of previous books happened in the Bacta War. A lengthy visit to the Darklighters on Tatooine? Check. Resolution for Bror Jace's weird, mysterious death at the beginning of Wedge's Gamble? Check. So I guess I didn't just read the Race Squadron books, I read all of them over and over again. So, a brief summary. Esain Assard has taken control of Thyfera, intending to control all production of Bacta. Deprived of New Republic support, Rogue Squadron resigns and goes rogue. They must oppose Isard's plans, defeat her Star Destroyer fleet, and free the planet from her tyrannical rule in a difficult battle against a seemingly superior force. So I like Wedge. I like how Stackpole writes Wedge, but he really doesn't give Wedge the character development that, say, Thorin gets. Wedge has to make a lot of hard decisions. He's got an awful lot on his plate. He still deeply feels the loss of all the past rogues, but that's pretty much it. There's just not the depth of development and character that happened with Corran, who's probably Stackpole's favorite character. Corran, meanwhile, has gone through some interesting developments. He found out at the end of the Krytos Trap a lot about his heritage, that basically his biological grandfather was a Corellian Jedi, and Luke Skywalker offers to train him. He turns it down because he's much more concerned with freeing the prisoners from Lizankia, but Corran also seems to prove Pope's aphorism about a little learning is a dangerous thing correct. He attempts a Jedi mind trick on a stormtrooper with disastrous results. And while he tries to fight with his grandfather's lightsaber, he doesn't know enough about lightsaber combat for that to be really an effective weapon for him. Luke is sending him stories of past Jedi and Jedi breathing exercises, but if anything, learning about his Jedi heritage has just made Corran start to doubt himself. He begins to wonder, I feel really bad about this situation. Is it force, or is it be second-guessing things? And it's definitely interesting interplay. I also liked Stackpole's nuanced take on the Jedi, which is basically that Corran's image of them is tainted by all these vague, nebulous legends he heard as a child, and also by all the propaganda films that the Emperor released. So in his mind, Jedis are interesting and powerful, but also a little bit sinister. There's not an awful lot going on with Tycho here. He gets a really good chapter, chapter 12, where he goes to the Alderaanian graveyard to do a personal Alderaanian ceremony or rite of leaving gifts to remember the dead. And it's really cool. It's a nice way for him to process what happened and still move on from it and realize that he's a completely different person now than he was when Alderaan was destroyed. But other than that, he's just there as Wedge's second in command. There's a neat little thing though where he chooses the transponder code for his X-Wing to be the same code for Another Chance, the Alderaanian ship that they sent off when they de-armed themselves, and that ends up really helping them out in the second ambush in the graveyard because an Alderaanian war frigate shows up thinking that Tycho's little X-Wing is Another Chance, and it essentially saves the day for them. For Mirax and Corin, books 1 and 2 was all about them becoming friends and how their friendship was developing. But then book 3, with Corin being imprisoned and Mirax being presumed dead for like half the book, there wasn't really any development on the relationship front. So I was a little surprised when book 4 opened with just they're a couple, they're together. I was a little surprised because I felt like we'd skipped a step. Maybe Stackpole didn't want to describe their GTR, define the relationship moment, but I sort of needed it because they went from slowly becoming friends to just being a legit couple to getting engaged, and then a few days later they get married, and I was like, whoa guys, you're moving sort of fast here. Gavin also got a little bit of development. He's slowly been getting development since probably book 2, Wedge's Gamble. We get to visit his family and Uncle Biggs's father. We get to see how the loss of the colony that they were giving Bacta to really upset him and hurt him, and how he's sort of coming into his own as a mature starfighter pilot. Unfortunately, while Stackpole does develop Corin a lot and Tycho and Gavin to a somewhat lesser degree, there's really not a lot of focus on any of the other rogues. It's almost as though after introducing them in Rogue Squadron and giving a lot of them some backstory, he's like, oh, I did all that, I don't have to do that anymore. But that comes with the side effect of when a rogue dies, when Riv Shiel, the Wolfman, is killed during an ambush by the Victory Star Destroyer, you just don't feel anything. There's no emotion or poignance there because Riv has maybe said 3 lines total. All we know about him is that he's Gavin's wingman, and there's just no emotional connection. I felt like Aiela's plotline was probably the least important to this story, merely because we just don't see a lot of it. Aiela and El Skull, who was a character from the Rogue Squadron comics, and some other people, are sent to Thyfera to rendezvous with the Ashern rebels and take down Isard's government from the inside out. We don't really see much of that. We see them embarrassing Reese's dad. They get attacked by Imperials, and then it's the very end, and Wedge and his troops are attacking over Thyfera, and they break into the building and capture Voru. I just felt like we were told they're doing this important task, but we saw very little of what they were doing, and essentially they only needed to be on Thyfera to capture Voru. However, I do think that Aiela's emotional arc was pretty good. She's still grieving the death of her husband, Derek, from the Krytos trap, and I like how she dealt with it and the conversations she had with El Skull. I like Aiela, I just wasn't sure how utilized she was in this book. And then we're introduced to Booster Tarek, Mirax's dad. He's a great businessman. He's a really imposing figure, but he's also, when it comes to his daughter, just like a straight up softie. He does not like Corin, can't put up with Corin, is always ragging on Corin, and then they come to terms and they're okay now. Booster got an Imperial Star Destroyer at the end, which I always knew that he had one in I, Jedi and in the Hand of Thrawn duology, but I'd sort of forgotten how that came about, so I enjoyed that. I also enjoyed that Stackpole brought Talon Card back, and unlike some of his other appearances in the Bantam era books, his portrayal seems pretty close to how he is in the Thrawn trilogy. He's smart, he's suave, he doesn't want to pick a side, but he also wants to make a profit. And when he finds out that he has a spy in his midst, he's absolutely furious about it because he loves information more than anything else, and that was information he did not have. I think the Imperial characters really suffered in this book, though. Isard was a bit of an enigma. We didn't see much of her, but she seemed very intelligent and very much like a Machiavellian schemer, and she just really falls apart in the Bacta War, to the point that I'm not sure how believable her complete meltdown is. We go from having a hyper-competent, strategically minded woman to someone that's just throwing temper tantrums left and right, and Voru and Arizi think that she's insane and think that she's always been insane, which I'm not sure that her actions in previous books back up that assertion, but her actions in this book definitely do. She's just needlessly obsessed with Wedge Antilles and getting rid of the rogues, almost playing the role that Curtin Lore played in the first 3 books, but Curtin Lore, while interesting, just never felt like he was on Isard's level, so it definitely feels like she's slipped. I was also a little confused about Voru's plan and like what he wanted out of this. It seemed pretty clear in the Krytos trap that he was out for himself. He wanted to revive Black Sun. He's tangentially working with Isard, but he's mostly just working for himself. And in here, he's like really cooperating with her. She makes him the Minister of Trade. It's only as Isard starts to fall apart that he's like, oh, how can this benefit me? Same with Arizi. She was a much more interesting character in the first 2 books. We didn't get much of her in book 3, and now she's just there. She's a good pilot. She knows that her other pilots aren't that good. She goes along with Isard and then Voru more than I thought she would. Possibly, I don't know, she's happy that she's back on her home world, but I just wanted more. And of the Imperial commanders of the various Star Destroyers, the guy that commanded the Lusankia he was rising in the ranks, but he seems like a moron. The captain of the Virulence is not competent at her job, but I guess that's how Booster ends up with her Star Destroyer. And then the third one sort of gets blackmailed because he's having an affair with a Moth's wife, and so I guess he was in it for the money and I could buy that. But I don't know. Compared to past books in the X-Wing series thus far, the villains just weren't as good this time around. So I've noticed something interesting, especially in longer running series, although 4 books usually isn't considered long. There's this desire after a point to break out of the status quo and hit the reset button. And usually how that happens is that the good guys, they need to turn rebels and they're not working for the government or for the authorities anymore. And so that's what Stackpole does here. The rogues essentially go rogue because the New Republic is not willing to attack Isard on Thyfera because they don't want to get involved in interplanetary stuff. They resign their commissions, they become mercenaries, and one-man battle in a way against Isard's forces. Except they're not really on their own because the New Republic essentially gives them all their ships. Pash Kraken and his squadrons are always passing through and they turn up at the pivotal battle at the end. And once they defeat Isard, the New Republic welcomes them back with open arms. And I guess too, the logistics of the rogues becoming mercenaries falls apart for me. At the beginning, they've got Corrin's X-Wing, they've got all the Z-95 headhunters that Tycho bought, got all their people, and they've got like 10 million credits that the Imperials put in bank accounts to implicate Tycho. That just doesn't seem enough to finance their initial escapades. The whole problem with groups or characters going rogue and going outside of the government is that to put together a military unit is really, really expensive, like a lot more than 10 million credits. So I think if it weren't for the unofficial support of the New Republic and Booster Tarek's sort of hand-wavy business deals, I don't think that they could have kept doing this renegade thing for as long as they did. It's months, it's literally months that they're able to do this and they have enough money to keep going. And while there were a lot more dogfights this time, especially compared to book 2 and book 3, I do have to agree that while I love the dogfights and they're exciting and they're thrilling, sometimes I just can't follow along. Stackpole will drive them, pulling the rudders and the stuff and back and forth, and it just loses me. So it's not that I'd skip to the character stuff, but I'm sort of floating a little confused through the battle scenes until I can get back to more character stuff. And going back to sort of not Stackpole's weird description of women, but sort of in that area, Voru definitely thinks that he can get with Arizi. It goes through his head more than once. And I'm just like, dude, you're old. She's not gonna get with you. She's just teaming up with you right now because she wants someone to protect her against Isar. That ain't gonna happen. So, in short, the Bacta War features a lot of exciting action, we're fighting against Isard. There's all these different battles and stealing things, and the ultimate battle is pretty exciting. I love the trick that Booster plays where he makes the Superstar Destroyer think that he's got loads of missiles on them when really all he has is the sensor and not any missiles itself. But I do feel like the book is maybe weakened a bit just by outright flimsy bad guys, which is a disappointment after really what I thought were pretty good bad guys in, honestly, books 1, 2, and 3. But I also am impressed that Stackpole was able to close off so many plot points, at the same time leaving some things open. Number 1, they blew up Isard's shuttle, but was she really in it? We heard her voice. That could have just been a recording or her broadcasting it from somewhere else. Number 2, we saw Arizi's ship go down and it was sort of flattened, but it didn't blow up, so maybe, possibly, she's not dead after all. And number 3, Moff Voru is arrested, Ayala and co stun him, but will he make a deal with the New Republic? Will he get out, try to restart Black Sun again? We'll possibly find out in later X-Wing books, and yeah, we'll probably find out in a book from 1999 by Michael A. Stackpole entitled Isard's Revenge. But on the whole, I thought that the Bacta War was exciting and thrilling and fun to read. So next time I will be finishing the informal Callista trilogy with Planet of Twilight by Barbara Hambly.